The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty streets of New Haven Colony as Marcus Chen adjusted his worn leather jacket. His younger brother David stood beside him, both men looking out at the Galactic Federation's massive battlecruiser hovering above their small mining settlement. The ship's dark hull blocked out half the sky, its weapons arrays gleaming like deadly stars. "They're really going through with this," David whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of alien technology. At 23, he was 5 years younger than Marcus, but the harsh life on this frontier world had aged them both beyond their years. Marcus nodded grimly. "The trial was a joke from the start. They never intended to let us walk free." His calloused hands clenched into fists as he thought about the so-called evidence presented against them. The Federation claimed they had sabotaged mining equipment, causing the death of 3 alien overseers. In reality, the brothers had simply refused to work 18-hour shifts in dangerous conditions that violated every safety protocol. The Federation had been expanding across the galaxy for over 2 centuries, absorbing smaller civilizations and turning their worlds into resource extraction sites. Earth had fallen under their control 30 years ago, though they called it voluntary integration in their propaganda broadcasts. Humans were considered a useful worker species, hardy enough to survive in harsh environments, but supposedly too primitive to pose any real threat. A loud screech of metal against stone echoed through the settlement as Federation soldiers began setting up their execution platform in the town square. The Zephyrians, tall reptilian beings with silver scales and cold yellow eyes, moved with mechanical precision. Their plasma rifles hung from tactical harnesses, ready to cut down any human who dared resist. Captain Vextar, the Federation's regional commander, emerged from the crowd of soldiers. His scales caught the sunlight as he surveyed the growing crowd of human colonists being herded into the square at gunpoint. The alien's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Citizens of New Haven Colony," Vextar's voice boomed through a translator device, the words carrying an electronic edge that made them sound even more menacing. "Today you will witness the price of defiance against Federation law. Let this serve as a reminder that order must be maintained across all civilized worlds." Marcus felt David's hand squeeze his shoulder. "Big brother," the younger man said quietly, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens today, I'm proud we stood up to them. Dad would have done the same thing." Their father had died in a mining accident 5 years earlier, crushed when unstable tunnel supports gave way during a Federation-mandated speed increase in ore extraction. The alien overseers had classified it as acceptable losses and docked the family's pay for the lost equipment. That was when Marcus first began questioning the system that treated human lives as disposable resources. The crowd of colonists filled the square, their faces a mixture of fear and barely contained rage. Many of them had worked alongside the Chen brothers, and they knew the charges were fabricated. But Federation soldiers surrounded the area, their weapons trained on anyone who might cause trouble. Maria Santos, an elderly woman who ran the colony's small medical clinic, pushed through the crowd until she reached the front. Her weathered face bore the scars of decades spent treating mining injuries that could have been prevented with proper safety equipment. She had delivered both Chen brothers when they were born, and watching them face execution felt like losing her own sons. "This is murder," she called out, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "Those boys never killed anyone. They were trying to protect their fellow workers." A Zephyrian soldier raised his rifle toward Maria, but she held her ground. "Go ahead and shoot," she said defiantly. "At my age, what do I have to lose? But everyone here knows the truth about what happened in that mine." Vextar gestured for the soldier to lower his weapon. The Federation commander understood the value of making examples, but he also knew that martyrs could be more dangerous than living dissidents. Better to let the old woman watch as her heroes died, breaking whatever hope the colonists might still harbor. The execution platform stood 3 meters high, built from polished metal that reflected the faces of the condemned men back at the crowd. 2 restraint posts rose from its center, equipped with energy shackles that would hold the prisoners in place during their final moments. Federation engineers had designed the platform for maximum psychological impact, ensuring that every execution would be burned into the memories of those who witnessed it. Marcus and David were brought forward by 4 guards, their hands bound with neural inhibitors that prevented any sudden movements. The devices sent painful jolts through their nervous systems if they tried to resist, but both brothers walked with their heads held high. As they climbed the steps to the platform, Marcus caught sight of something that made his heart skip. In the crowd, nearly hidden behind a group of taller colonists, stood Elena Rodriguez. She was the colony's communications officer, and more importantly, she was part of the underground resistance network that had been slowly growing across human settlements. Elena's dark eyes met his for just a moment, and she gave an almost imperceptible nod. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. Whatever the resistance had planned, it would come too late to save him and David. But maybe, just maybe, their deaths wouldn't be meaningless. The brothers were secured to the restraint posts as Vextar activated a holographic recording device. This execution would be broadcast live across the Federation's communication network, serving as a warning to humans on dozens of other worlds. The alien commander wanted every member of their species to understand the consequences of challenging Federation authority. Citizens of the galaxy, Vextar began his prepared speech. Today, we demonstrate the Federation's commitment to justice and order. These criminals sought to undermine the prosperity that our civilization has brought to countless worlds. Their actions resulted in the deaths of 3 dedicated overseers who were working to improve mining efficiency for the benefit of all. David spat on the platform's polished surface. Improvement? You mean working people to death for alien profits? One of the guards moved to strike him, but Vextar held up a restraining claw. The commander actually smiled at David's outburst. Your defiance only proves the necessity of this action. Humanity must learn to embrace their place in the greater galactic community rather than clinging to primitive notions of independence. Marcus looked out at the crowd one more time, memorizing the faces of people he had known all his life. Children he had taught to swim in the colony's water treatment pools. Elderly couples he had helped move furniture when arthritis made the task impossible. Fellow miners who had shared their lunch rations during the lean months when supply ships were delayed. These were good people who deserved better than a life of servitude under alien rule. If his death could somehow spark the flame that would eventually free them, then maybe it would be worth it. The Zephyrian soldiers raised their plasma rifles, the weapons humming as they charged to full power. Vextar savored the moment, knowing that this broadcast would be seen by millions of beings across the galaxy. Fear was a powerful tool for maintaining control, and public executions sent a clear message about the price of rebellion. In the crowd, Elena Rodriguez discreetly activated a small device hidden in her jacket. The signal it sent was brief and encrypted, but its message was clear. The resistance cells scattered across human space had been waiting for this moment, and now they would act. The plasma rifles fired in perfect synchronization, twin beams of superheated energy striking the Chen brothers in their chests. Their bodies jerked against the restraints before going limp, smoke rising from the cauterized wounds. The crowd stood in stunned silence as Vextar turned to address them once more. "Let this be the end of foolish resistance," the alien commander declared. "The Federation offers prosperity to those who embrace their role in our great civilization. Choose wisely." But even as he spoke those words, Vextar had no idea that a clock had already begun counting down, 8 minutes and 17 seconds to be exact. That was how long it would take for Elena's signal to reach the hidden resistance base in the asteroid belt, and for the response to arrive at New Haven Colony. The response would come in the form of Marcus Chen's older brother Jake, a man the Federation believed had died in a mining accident 6 months earlier. A man who had actually been recruited by the Resistance and trained in the art of war by human military veterans who remembered what freedom looked like. Jake Chen was coming home, and he was bringing friends. 8 minutes and 12 seconds after the execution broadcast ended, Jake Chen's modified cargo hauler dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Haven system. The ship looked like countless other vessels that moved goods between Federation worlds, its hull scarred by years of supposed commercial use. But beneath that worn exterior lay military-grade armor plating, stealth generators, and enough firepower to level a city. Jake sat in the pilot's seat, his jaw clenched as he watched the delayed broadcast on his communication screen. He had seen his brothers die in real time, unable to do anything but maintain radio silence as their execution played out. The Resistance had spent months planning this operation, and revealing themselves too early would have doomed them all. "Jake," came a soft voice from behind him. Sarah Mitchell, the Resistance's tactical coordinator, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry about Marcus and David. They died as heroes." "They died as examples," Jake replied, his voice hollow with grief and rage. "But their deaths won't be meaningless. Not if we make the Federation pay for what they've done." The cargo hauler's crew consisted of 12 humans, all of them refugees from Federation-controlled worlds. Some had lost family members to alien overseers. Others had escaped from labor camps or managed to desert from Federation auxiliary forces. Each one had their own reasons for joining the Resistance, but they shared a common goal: driving the invaders off human worlds. Tommy Park, a former Federation communications technician, looked up from his console. "Jake, I'm picking up massive energy signatures from the colony. It looks like they've got a full garrison stationed there, plus that battlecruiser in orbit." "How many soldiers?" Sarah asked, already running calculations in her head. "At least 200 Zephyrians on the ground, maybe more." "The ship's crew complement would be another 500. Tommy shook his head. "This isn't going to be easy." Jake activated the ship's internal communication system. "All hands, this is it. We've trained for this moment, and now we get to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. Remember, we're not just fighting for New Haven Colony. We're fighting for every human world under Federation control." The Resistance had been carefully preparing for this day, stockpiling weapons and recruiting new members across dozens of star systems. Most importantly, they had been studying Federation military tactics and technology, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited by a smaller, more agile force. Humans possessed several advantages that their alien oppressors had consistently underestimated. They adapted quickly to new situations, thought creatively under pressure, and fought with a ferocity that often surprised enemies who saw them as docile worker drones. The Federation's own propaganda about human inferiority had become a liability, causing their forces to prepare for the wrong kind of enemy. "Sarah, deploy the recon drones," Jake ordered. "I want to know exactly where every Federation soldier is positioned before we make our move." The cargo hauler's hidden launch bays opened, releasing a swarm of tiny surveillance devices that would be nearly impossible to detect against the system's cosmic background radiation. Each drone was equipped with advanced sensors that could penetrate most forms of military screening, giving the Resistance a detailed picture of their target. As the drones approached New Haven Colony, they revealed the full scope of the Federation's presence. The main garrison was housed in a fortified compound near the primary mining facility, its energy shields and automated defense turrets making it appear nearly impregnable. Additional patrols moved through the colony itself, keeping the human population under constant surveillance. But the Resistance had studied Federation defensive doctrine extensively, and they knew that the aliens' greatest strength could also become their weakness. The Zephyrians relied heavily on their superior technology, which made them predictable in their tactical choices. They always chose the most heavily fortified positions and trusted their shields and sensors to detect any approaching threats. There, Sarah pointed to a section of the garrison's perimeter where the energy shield intersected with a natural rock formation. That's our entry point. The generators assume the rock face provides natural protection, so they don't overlap their coverage there. Jake nodded. Tommy, can you hack their communication systems? The former technician grinned. Already working on it. These idiots are still using the same encryption protocols they had when I was working for them. I can give us maybe 10 minutes of chaos before they adapt. The plan was simple, but dangerous. The cargo hauler would make a direct assault on the orbital battle cruiser, drawing the Federation's attention skyward while a small strike team infiltrated the ground garrison. Once inside the compound, they would overload the main power core, creating an explosion visible from orbit. It was essentially a suicide mission, but Jake had volunteered for the ground assault without hesitation. His brothers were dead, and he intended to make sure their killers followed them into the afterlife. Jake, Sarah said quietly as the team prepared their equipment, there's something you need to know. The Resistance leadership didn't authorize this operation. They wanted to wait until we had better odds. He looked up from checking his plasma rifle's power pack. Are you having second thoughts? No, she replied firmly. I think they're wrong. Sometimes you have to strike when the enemy least expects it, even if the tactical situation isn't ideal. Besides, we can't let the Federation think they can execute our people without consequences. The strike team consisted of 6 volunteers, each one equipped with captured Federation body armor and weapons. They would use a small shuttle to reach the colony's surface, while the cargo hauler engaged the battle cruiser, hopefully drawing most of the garrison's attention away from their landing site. As they prepared to launch, Tommy's console lit up with incoming transmissions. Jake, you need to hear this. I'm picking up chatter from other human colonies across the sector. Word about the execution is spreading fast, and it sounds like spontaneous uprisings are breaking out everywhere. Jake felt a surge of hope mixed with determination. Marcus and David's death hadn't just sparked one act of revenge, it had ignited a rebellion that was spreading across human space like wildfire. The Federation's attempt to intimidate their subjects had backfired spectacularly. Even better, he said grimly. Let's give our people something to rally around. The shuttle detached from the cargo hauler and began its descent toward New Haven Colony, its stealth systems engaged to avoid Federation sensors. Behind them, Jake's ship accelerated toward the battle cruiser, powering up weapons that had been hidden beneath false hull plating. On the colony's surface, Captain Vexitar was reviewing reports from other sectors when his communication officer interrupted with urgent news. Sir, we're detecting an unscheduled ship approaching from the outer system. It appears to be a civilian cargo hauler, but something feels wrong about its trajectory. The Zephyrian commander hissed in annoyance. Run a full sensor sweep. If it's smugglers trying to take advantage of the chaos, I want them arrested and made an example of. But as the sensors focused on the approaching vessel, they detected energy signatures that didn't match any known civilian configuration. Weapon ports were opening along the ship's hull, revealing military hardware that should have been impossible to acquire. Battle stations, Vexitar snarled. All ships, engage the hostile vessel immediately. The battlecruiser's massive guns swiveled to track the cargo hauler, but Jake's ship was already moving in an evasive pattern that made it difficult to target. Plasma bolts lit up the space around the modified freighter as it closed the distance to its target, returning fire with weapons that packed a surprising punch. On the ground, the garrison's attention turned skyward as the space battle began. Federation soldiers rushed to defensive positions, preparing for a possible landing assault that might follow the naval engagement. None of them noticed the small shuttle that slipped through their sensor net and landed in a maintenance facility on the compound's edge. Jake and his team moved swiftly through the garrison's service tunnels, using Tommy's hacked access codes to bypass security checkpoints. The facility's layout matched the intelligence they had gathered, but seeing it in person made the scale of the challenge clear. The Federation had turned the former mining headquarters into a fortress that could withstand a siege. "Power core is 3 levels down," whispered Lisa Crenshaw, a former colonial engineer who had joined the resistance after her husband died in a preventable industrial accident. "We'll need to plant charges on the primary containment field generators and the backup systems simultaneously." The team split into 2 groups, each carrying enough explosive devices to level a city block. They moved through maintenance shafts and emergency corridors, avoiding the main garrison areas where Federation soldiers were preparing for battle. Above them, the space engagement was intensifying as more Federation ships arrived to support the battlecruiser. Jake's cargo hauler was taking heavy damage, but it continued to fight with a determination that surprised the alien crews. They had expected human resistance to collapse quickly when faced with superior firepower. Instead, the modified freighter was proving that human ingenuity could overcome technological disadvantages. Its crew had studied Federation weapons and developed countermeasures that negated many of their enemies' advantages. Decoy drones confused targeting systems, while adaptive shielding deflected energy weapons that should have penetrated the ship's defenses. In the garrison's power core chamber, Jake's team worked quickly to place their explosives. The facility's fusion reactor was powerful enough to supply energy to the entire colony, which meant its destruction would be visible for thousands of kilometers. 2 minutes, Lisa announced as she connected the final detonator. "Everyone needs to be clear of the blast radius before these charges go off." But as they prepared to evacuate, proximity alarms began sounding throughout the compound. Federation security forces had finally detected their presence and were moving to intercept them. Heavily armed Zephyrian soldiers were already sealing off the exit routes, trapping the strike team inside the facility. Jake made a decision that he knew would cost him his life. "Go," he told his teammates. "Use the emergency shaft to reach the surface. I'll hold them off and make sure these charges detonate." "Jake, no," Sarah protested over the communication link. "We can find another way out." "There's no time," he replied, checking his rifle's ammunition counter. "Tell everyone what we did here today. Tell them that the Chen brothers didn't die for nothing." The sound of approaching boots echoed through the corridors as Federation soldiers closed in on the power core chamber. Jake took cover behind a control console and prepared for his final battle, knowing that in 60 seconds, his sacrifice would light up the sky and show the galaxy that humans would never stop fighting for their freedom. The first Federation soldiers to enter the power core chamber never knew what hit them. Jake Chen moved like a man possessed, his plasma rifle spitting deadly energy as he cut down 3 Zephyrians before they could return fire. Years of mining work had given him strength and endurance that surprised his enemies, while resistance training had taught him how to fight smart rather than just hard. "Human scum!" snarled a Federation sergeant as more soldiers poured into the chamber. "Surrender now, and we might make your death quick." Jake's response was another burst of plasma fire that sent the alien diving for cover behind a support beam. "Come and take me," he growled, his voice carrying the same defiant tone that had gotten his brothers killed 8 minutes ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus and David had died publicly, their execution broadcast across the galaxy as a warning. But Jake's death would serve a different purpose. In 30 seconds, when these explosives detonated, every human in Federation space would know that their oppressors were not invincible. Above the colony, the space battle was reaching its climax. The cargo hauler, Sarah's Revenge, had taken crippling damage from the battlecruiser's guns, but its crew refused to surrender. Tommy Park was still at his communications station, despite a shrapnel wound that left his left arm useless, coordinating with resistance cells across the sector. "This is it, people," he broadcast on every human frequency he could access. "Remember this day. Remember that we fought back when they thought we were beaten." The ship's captain, Elena Rodriguez, had transferred from the colony just hours before the execution. She had volunteered to pilot the suicide run, knowing that someone needed to make sure Jake's ground assault succeeded. Her hand stayed steady on the controls even as plasma fire punched through the hull around her. "Tommy, how long until Jake's charges blow?" she asked. 20 seconds, he replied, his voice tight with pain. "The garrison's security forces are closing in on him fast." Elena made a decision that would be remembered for generations. Instead of trying to escape or continue the hopeless battle with the battlecruiser, she turned her damaged ship toward the Federation garrison on the colony's surface. The cargo hauler's remaining fuel and ammunition would add to the explosive force of Jake's charges, ensuring that nothing remained of the alien stronghold. In the power core chamber, Jake was down to his last energy cell. 6 Federation soldiers lay dead around him, but more kept coming. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his rifle flying across the room. As he struggled to reach the weapon, a Zephyrian soldier stepped into view with his rifle trained on Jake's head. "End of the line, terrorist!" the alien hissed. Jake looked up at his killer and smiled. "Actually, it's just the beginning." The chronometer on his explosive device reached 0. The detonation started small, a controlled implosion that collapsed the containment fields around the fusion reactor. But within microseconds, the chain reaction spread outward, turning the entire garrison into a miniature star. The explosion vaporized everything within a 3-kilometer radius and sent a pillar of fire reaching toward the sky. At the exact same moment, Sarah's Revenge crashed into the outer edge of the blast zone. The ship's remaining antimatter fuel detonated in a secondary explosion that could be seen from orbit, adding its own fury to the inferno that consumed the Federation stronghold. On the battlecruiser above, Captain Vextar watched in stunned disbelief as his supposedly secure garrison simply ceased to exist. The explosion was so intense that it temporarily overwhelmed his ship's sensors, leaving him blind to what was happening on the colony's surface. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting massive energy readings from across the sector. It appears that human settlements on 17 different worlds have simultaneously launched attacks against Federation facilities." The rebellion that had started with 2 brothers' defiant stand was spreading faster than anyone had imagined possible. On each world, resistance cells that had been carefully hidden for years suddenly revealed themselves in coordinated strikes against alien infrastructure. Mining facilities, communication arrays, and administrative centers were all targeted simultaneously. The Federation's response was predictably heavy-handed. They deployed additional battle fleets to the affected systems and declared martial law across all human-controlled territories. But their actions only served to radicalize more of the human population, turning peaceful colonists into active resistance fighters. On New Haven Colony, the survivors emerged from their shelters to find the landscape forever changed. Where the Federation garrison had once stood, there was now only a crater of melted rock that glowed with residual heat. The alien soldiers who had terrorized their community for years were gone, reduced to atoms in the explosion that lit up the sky. Maria Santos, the elderly doctor who had spoken out during the execution, stood at the edge of the crater with tears streaming down her face. She was mourning the loss of all 3 Chen brothers, but she was also feeling something she hadn't experienced in decades. Hope. "They did it," she whispered. "Marcus, David. And Jake actually did it." The battlecruiser in orbit was already preparing to land troops to restore Federation control, but they would find a very different situation than they expected. The human colonists were no longer cowed by alien authority. They had seen their oppressors bleed, and they knew that resistance was possible. More importantly, word of the uprising was spreading across the galaxy through channels that the Federation couldn't control. Human traders, maintenance workers, and even auxiliary troops were carrying the story of New Haven Colony to every corner of known space. The three brothers who had died on this dusty world were becoming symbols of human defiance. Within hours, recruitment for resistance cells increased by 300%. Humans who had accepted their fate under alien rule began asking questions about weapons, tactics, and coordination with other rebel groups. The Federation's attempt to crush human spirit through public execution had achieved the exact opposite result. The alien leadership struggled to understand how their seemingly foolproof strategy had backfired so completely. For 2 centuries, public executions had been an effective tool for maintaining control over conquered species. Most civilizations learned quickly that resistance only brought suffering and death. But humans were different. They possessed an almost irrational willingness to sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. Even worse, from the Federation's perspective, they had an annoying tendency to remember their martyrs and use their deaths as inspiration for further resistance. General Thexvar, the Federation's military commander for the human sectors, reviewed the casualty reports from 17 different worlds with growing alarm. In a single day, the aliens had lost more personnel and equipment than in the previous 5 years of occupation. The financial cost of replacing destroyed facilities would run into billions of credits. "How many more humans are involved in these resistance networks?" he asked his intelligence chief. "We estimate between 5 and 10% of the total population," came the reply. "But that number is growing rapidly as news of the uprising spreads." The general's scaled fist crashed down on his desk. "Impossible! No species maintains organized resistance after decades of occupation. They should have been pacified by now." But the evidence was undeniable. Humans were proving to be the most stubborn and troublesome species the Federation had ever encountered. Their capacity for long-term planning, combined with their willingness to accept enormous casualties for strategic gains, made them uniquely dangerous opponents. On New Haven Colony, the surviving resistance members were already planning their next move. Elena Rodriguez's communication equipment had survived the explosion, hidden in a reinforced bunker outside the colony. Using it, they were coordinating with rebel groups across human space, sharing intelligence and planning coordinated attacks. The Federation would retaliate, of course. More troops would be deployed. New security measures would be implemented and many innocent people would suffer. But the psychological damage had already been done. Every human in the galaxy now knew that their alien oppressors could be defeated by ordinary people with enough courage and determination. Tommy Park, who had survived the destruction of Sarah's revenge by ejecting in an escape pod, was already working on plans for the next phase of the rebellion. His technical expertise would be crucial for developing new weapons and communication systems that could evade Federation detection. "The Chen brothers started something that won't be stopped," he told the assembled resistance leaders via encrypted transmission. "Every human world is watching us now, waiting to see if we can keep the fire burning." The fire was indeed burning, spreading from star system to star system like a plague that the Federation couldn't contain. On factory worlds and agricultural colonies, in orbital habitats and asteroid mining stations, humans were remembering what it felt like to fight for something greater than themselves. The execution of Marcus and David Chen had lasted less than 5 seconds. The destruction of the Federation garrison had taken 8 minutes and 17 seconds from the moment their signal reached Jake's ship. But the rebellion they had sparked would continue for generations, until every human world was free or every last resistance fighter was dead. In the end, The Federation discovered too late that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their creativity or their technological innovation. It was their absolute refusal to accept defeat, no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. They would keep fighting until freedom was won, or until there were no humans left to fight. The galaxy would never be the same again, and it all started with two brothers who refused to bow down to alien oppression, and a third brother who made sure their deaths were not in vain. The fire that began on New Haven Colony would burn across the stars, lighting the way to human independence one world at a time.